Russia has been spying on the U.S., according to a U.S. treaty that lets Russia spy on the U.S. Welcome back to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. I'm sure, like many Americans, you've slept comfortably at night, knowing that Russian spy planes have been soaring over the United States for the past 2 decades. What's that, you say? You didn't know about the Russian spy planes? Well, you need to brush up on your international arms control treaties. Yes, the government has allowed Russian spy planes to fly over the U.S. for nearly 2 decades. And it was all perfectly legal because of the Open Skies Treaty. Back in 1955, President Dwight D. Eisenhower proposed that the U.S. and the Soviet Union allow each other to fly reconnaissance planes over their territories. You know, to show each other that nothing sneaky was going on. For some reason, the Soviet Union wasn't into the idea. Eventually, after the Soviet Union fell, President George H.W. Bush proposed the Treaty on Open Skies. It went into effect in 2002 under George W. Bush. 35 countries are now members, including the United States and Russia. The Open Skies Treaty basically allows these countries to fly unarmed surveillance planes over each other. You see, the idea was the spying would in fact build confidence that neither side was preparing for military action. I mean, obviously, right? What better way to establish trust than to spy on each other? I've tried to explain that to my neighbors several times, but they just called the police. Okay, to be fair, the Open Skies Treaty contains very specific and technical limitations on what these surveillance planes can record. For example, they can only record a ground resolution of no better than 30 centimeters. That's about 12 inches. And there are other requirements too, like flight plans have to be reviewed by both countries, each country has a limit on how many flights they can do, and the data they collect on the flight has to be shared with the country being observed. It can also be shared with all of the other countries in the treaty. You know, when I told my neighbors I'd be happy to share my observations with the whole neighborhood, they called the police again. The treaty talks about improving openness and transparency, which sounds good, but there is a downside. Like the fact that the Pentagon and American intelligence agencies have contended the Russians are also using flights over the United States to map out critical American infrastructure that could be hit by conventional weapons or cyber attacks. But now, those days could be over. President Trump says he's withdrawing the U.S. from the Open Skies Treaty, a move the Democratic chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Eliot Engel, is calling illegal. Engel said there is something particularly dangerous about a president, a secretary of state, and a secretary of defense knowingly breaking the law in ways that jeopardize our safety and national security. Engel argues that according to the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act, Trump needed to notify Congress at least 120 days before pulling out of the agreement, which he did not do. So, why does Trump want to pull out of the Open Skies Treaty? Well, this will shock you, but Russia wasn't honoring the treaty.
Russia has for many years imposed flight restrictions inconsistent with the treaty, including flight limitations over Kaliningrad and restricting flights in Russia near its border with Georgia. Russia's ongoing selective implementation has undermined the Open Skies Treaty. Over many years, including at successive NATO summits, allies have called on Russia to return to full compliance.
Basically, Russia wasn't giving the other 34 member countries full access to spy on it, but it was using the treaty to spy on them. In particular, Russia spied on important things in the US, like critical infrastructure, and even Trump's New Jersey Golf estate. Gotcha! Trump nudged the ball out of the sandpit, and now the Russians have blackmail. Russia was also violating the Open Skies Accord by not permitting flights over a city where it was believed Russia was deploying nuclear weapons that could reach Europe. That is a definite violation of the treaty, as countries are not allowed to put areas off limits. But is that enough of a reason to pull the US out of a treaty? Not according to the US's European NATO allies. The treaty is arguably more valuable to Europe than the US. One reason is that the US can rely on satellite technology to see what's going on in Russia even without the Open Skies Treaty. But smaller countries in Europe don't have that ability. The treaty provides smaller states without significant satellite capabilities an important instrument to monitor their powerful neighbors, especially Russia. Basically, everybody agrees that Russia has been cheating. They just disagree on how to deal with that. Some NATO members worry that if the US pulls out of the treaty, Russia will as well. Democrats in Congress also agree that Russia is a problem, but say that should be dealt with by making Russia comply with the treaty, not by withdrawing from it. That hasn't been going so well. Direct talks between the US and Russia in 2016 and 2017 didn't work, to the point where no flights were conducted in 2018. But Trump has now said that he's open to more negotiation, that maybe he won't withdraw the US from the treaty if Russia allows for more equal spying. And really, isn't that all anyone wants?
I think we have a very good relationship with Russia, but Russia didn't adhere to the treaty, so until they adhere, we will pull out. But there's a very good chance we'll make a new agreement or do something to put that agreement back together. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to pull out, and they're going to come back and want to make a deal.
But as of now, the US is due to withdraw from the Open Skies Treaty in November unless Trump makes a deal. The Open Skies Treaty is not the first important agreement with Russia that Trump has torn up. In February 2019, Trump withdrew the US from the INF, or Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, because in that case too, Russia was cheating, or more accurately, nearly 6 years of diplomacy and more than 30 meetings have failed to convince Russia to return to compliance with the INF Treaty. And there could be another agreement that also gets torn up soon. It's called New START. It was created in 2010 by President Barack Obama and limits the US and Russia to just 1,550 deployed nuclear weapons. I mean, that's ridiculous. How many times can you destroy every major city in the world with just 1,500 nuclear weapons each? I bet not more than like 5 times. But Trump has said he would not renew the New START treaty unless China joins. And China does not want to join. China supposedly has only 300 or so deployed nuclear weapons, but the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want to limit themselves to that. And Russia and the US don't want to reduce theirs to 300, and no one wants to bump up how many nukes China has. Does this mean this nuclear arms treaty with Russia will also disappear? Well, it's up for renewal in February, after the 2020 US presidential election. So really, the choice is up to you. So what do you think of the Open Skies Treaty? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. This is America Uncovered.